Mythology is basically humanity's blooper reel full of creatures too weird for even evolution to claim. And tonight, we're digging through the archives to roast 7 of nature's biggest PR disasters, some alive, some fossilized, and some purely made up by drunk storytellers around campfires. From howling hairballs to screaming ghosts, this lineup is so bizarre it makes evolution look like it forgot to save halfway through the simulation. Think about it. Humans once saw a weird shadow in the woods and went, "Yep, definitely a half-man, half-wolf situation." We spotted a whale skull and said, "That's a sea demon that eats sins." Basically, we've been bad at zoology since forever. But fear not, your sarcastic wildlife guide is here to separate real science from the fever dreams. We'll find out which monsters have a basis in biology and which ones were clearly invented after too much mead. Like, comment, and subscribe, or the next weird monster might show up in your backyard. I'm not saying it will, but statistically speaking, every horror movie starts with someone ignoring that warning. So grab your silver bullets, garlic, and maybe a notebook. We're diving into the hairy, screechy, fang-infested world of mythological mayhem, starting with the poster boy of bad transformations, the werewolf. The original, "It's not me when I'm angry" excuse. Half man, half wolf, and entirely incapable of keeping a shirt intact past midnight. According to legend, one moonlit evening and a case of emotional instability could turn your average villager into a snarling, fur-covered killing machine. Basically, the world's first, "I'm not toxic, I'm just transforming" guy. But where did this furry fever dream come from? Real wolves, of course. Ancient Europeans were absolutely terrified of them. Big, fast, coordinated pack hunters that could hit 50 kilometers per hour, 31 miles per hour, and take down prey several times their size. Mix that with rabies outbreaks, a real disease that does cause aggression, foaming, and biting, and suddenly you've got your recipe for "Larry from accounting just mauled the neighbor, must be a werewolf." Fun fact. Early werewolf trials were just as ridiculous as witch hunts. In 1521, 2 French peasants were literally executed for confessing under torture that they rubbed magic ointment on themselves to become wolves. Spoiler, it was probably just animal fat, not Hogwarts grade shape-shifting lotion. And let's talk biology. Transforming your entire skeletal system, muscle mass, and hair follicles in seconds? Physically impossible. You'd need an energy surge equivalent to a tactical nuke just to regrow that much hair. Evolution doesn't do instant updates, it barely manages to fix nearsightedness. Weird detail? The moon's been unfairly dragged into this for centuries. While lunar cycles do influence animal behavior, even coral spawning and hospital admissions rise on full moons. No study has ever linked moonlight to spontaneous manscaping. Sorry, Twilight fan. So, why does this legend survive? Simple, fear plus ego. People love believing the beast within is powerful, not just cranky, unshaven, and bad at boundaries. The werewolf myth is basically self-help for people who think therapy is too mainstream. And if evolution really did approve this design, bipedal, hairy, rage issues, it already made one. It's called a teenager. Which monster on this list deserves the silver bullet roast? Drop it below. Then we'll go to a creature that proves you don't need 2 eyes to be terrifyingly overrated, the Cyclops. Ancient Greece's version of 1 eye, 0 spatial awareness. According to myth, these hulking blacksmith giants forged Zeus's thunderbolts, built the gods' weapons, and apparently never invented safety goggles. The name literally means round eye, which is cute until you realize their biggest weakness was depth perception. Imagine trying to hammer a sword without knowing how far away it is. But here's the scientific twist. The Cyclops myth probably came from fossil confusion. Early Greeks on Mediterranean islands stumbled across massive skulls with a single central hole where the nose cavity Saturday, to them, that screamed giant one-eyed monster. To paleontologists, it screams prehistoric dwarf elephant. Turns out, ancient pachyderms had skulls with big central openings for trunks, so every Cyclops skull was basically a misidentified baby elephant. Talk about history's worst game of Guess Who? Now, real biology does offer a rare condition called cyclopia, where embryos form a single eye due to developmental defects. It's been observed in humans, sharks, even goats. Tragically, those animals don't survive long, but it might have been enough for ancient farmers to see one and think, "Oh no, the prophecy's real." So yes, a few real-life genetic misfires likely fed the myth machine. Weird detail, Homer's Cyclops, Polyphemus, was technically a farmer. He raised sheep. So the terrifying monster who eats sailors raw also dabbled in artisanal cheesemaking. Truly, the blueprint for every grumpy introvert with hobbies. And let's be honest, if you only have one eye, you'd probably be cranky too. The poor guy just wanted some privacy in his cave, and Odysseus rolls in, eats his food, then stabs him in the retina with a sharpened stick. That's not heroism, that's burglary with bonus ophthalmology. So what's the survival angle? The Cyclops didn't evolve in nature, it evolved in storytelling. It gave ancient humans a face to put on fear of the unknown, proof that nature could still punch above human size. That one big eye? A metaphor for obsession, ego, or maybe just poor ancient anatomy classes. But hey, at least the Cyclops myth inspired centuries of great art and possibly the first ever dad joke about keeping an eye out. Evolution might not make monsters like that, but human imagination sure does. Next up, let's slither into something truly biblical in size. A snake so long it could double as bad public transportation. Vasuki indicus. The mythic serpent king, who moonlighted as Shiva's neck accessory and occasional mountain tug-of-war rope. In Hindu mythology, this guy literally volunteered as the churning cord for the ocean of milk, a cosmic smoothie that birthed both immortality and questionable metaphors. Basically, he's the only snake in history to make CrossFit look religious. But beneath that myth lies something real and terrifying. Prehistoric snakes that actually could have been mistaken for Vasuki's cousins. Enter Titanoboa cerrejonensis, a 13-meter, 43-foot serpent weighing over a ton that once slithered through tropical Colombia about 60 million years ago. With a body as thick as an oil drum and a bite force strong enough to crush a crocodile, Titanoboa was evolution's way of saying, "You thought dinosaurs were scary? Hold my venom." Now, India's fossil record offers hints of enormous extinct snakes too, like Paleophis indicus, an ancient marine serpent that could reach nearly 9 meters, 30 feet. Not quite Vasuki size, but enough to make any fisherman question career choices. Add centuries of storytelling, river fog, and one too many, "I swear I saw it" moments, and voila, a divine snake legend is born. Weird detail. Some scholars note that Vasuki's name translates to the excellent one, which is ironic, considering every depiction shows him being yanked, stretched, or tied around someone's neck like divine jewelry. Talk about the world's most underpaid accessory. Let's hit the myth check. Could a snake ever pull a mountain? No, unless you mean metaphorically pulling human imagination uphill for 3,000 years. The tensile strength of even the biggest constrictor tops out around 400 pounds of squeeze pressure, not planetary centrifuge levels. Vasuki isn't about physics. He's about symbolism, cycles of destruction, renewal, and that weird mix of fear and respect humans have for snakes. Biologically, snakes are survival superstars. They've existed for over 100 million years, surviving asteroid impacts, ice ages, and fashion trends. So while Vasuki may be myth, his real-life cousins are evolutionary royalty masters of camouflage, ambush, and shedding both skin and bad PR. And that's why Vasuki lasts not as a zoological fact, but as a mythic avatar of power humans couldn't quite comprehend. Because when you see something that long, silent, and deadly, you don't write a field guide. You write scripture. If ghosts had influencers, the Banshee would be verified. A spectral woman who shows up before death, not to help, not to warn, but to scream about it. Basically, Ireland's earliest push notification for doom. Forget doorbells or phone calls. The Celts had surround sound shrieking in high fidelity. Legend says she's a pale woman with flowing hair and bloodshot eyes, often weeping or wailing outside your window when someone's about to die. Charming. Some versions make her a ghostly mourner for noble families. Others, a vengeful fae with the lungs of a metal singer. Either way, she's not showing up with cookies. But let's unpack this with a little science. That eerie, high-pitched cry could be barn owls, known for unholy screeches around 2-3 kilohertzes that can carry for kilometers. Or vixens, female foxes whose mating calls sound exactly like someone being murdered in the next valley. Combine that with misty nights, grief, and whiskey. And you've got Ireland's perfect storm for supernatural acoustics. Psychologists even have a term for this kind of phenomenon: auditory pareidolia, when the brain tries to find meaning in random noise. So, when the wind howls just right and you've recently lost Aunt Moira, your brain fills in the blanks with, "Oh no, she's coming for me too." Weird detail. In Irish lore, if multiple banshees scream at once, it means someone important like a king is dying. Translation: the louder the chaos, the higher your social status. Even death had VIP perks. Culturally, the banshee isn't just spooky, she's cathartic. In ancient Ireland, women called keeners were literally paid to wail at funerals, expressing the grief others couldn't. The banshee myth likely evolved from that tradition, a supernatural version of public mourning. She gave fear a voice when words failed. Overhyped myth check? Totally. No confirmed audio recordings, zero ghost sightings, and yet people still swear by the wail before death, because deep down, humans love a heads up, even a terrifying eardrum-piercing one. So why does she endure? Because she personifies loss. Every culture invents a messenger of death. Ireland just gave hers a better soundtrack. And honestly, if I had to announce every impending tragedy on Earth, I'd be screaming too. From Ireland's ghostly soprano to West Virginia's flying panic attack, meet Mothman, the cryptid that turned paranoia into pop culture, and the creature that proves small-town gossip travels faster than wings. First spotted in 1,966 inches. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, this red-eyed terror was described as a 2-meter tall, 6.5-foot humanoid with a 3-meter 10-foot wingspan and the aerodynamic grace of a wet towel. Witnesses claimed it could fly at 160 kilometers per hour, 100 miles per hour, which if true means it should have at least qualified for the Air Force. The first encounter? 2 couples driving through an abandoned TNT factory saw glowing eyes in the dark and did what every rational human does. They panicked, sped home, and called the police after telling half the town. Within days, Mothman fever hit. People saw it everywhere. Rooftops, trees, highways. Someone probably saw it in their soup. Now, the science. Most experts believe Mothman sightings were likely misidentified birds, specifically the sandhill crane, Antigone canadensis, which can stand 1.2 meters, 4 feet tall, has a wingspan over 2 meters, 7 feet, and red patches of skin around its eyes. Cranes displaced from their migration path could have wandered into the area, startling night drivers who were one Red Bull away from hallucinating. There's also the barred owl theory, whose reflective red eyes and silent flight can look downright demonic in a flashlight beam. And, fun fact, eyewitness reports of glowing red eyes almost always involve headlights. Turns out, evolution didn't grant many creatures built-in LEDs. Weird detail: Mothman supposedly haunted Point Pleasant for 13 months until the 15th of December, 1967, when the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Locals linked the tragedy to the creature, calling it an omen. Science, however, blamed metal fatigue, not moth sabotage. Still, Mothman Prophecies was born, and Hollywood ran with it like a bat out of cryptid hell. Overhype check? Big time. Zero physical evidence, no feathers, no poop, not even a moth meme that checks out. Yet Mothman has his own statue, museum, and annual festival. That's right, an entire tourism industry for a creature that might have been a very confused bird. But that's what keeps the myth alive: collective fear. People needed a face for their unease in an era of Cold War paranoia and collapsing bridges. Mothman wasn't just a monster. He was a metaphor for dread itself, our anxiety given feathers. Still, let's be honest. If I saw a 10-foot bat bird staring at me on a dark road, I'd need therapy and new pants. Time to meet Leviathan, the creature that proves even the Bible wasn't immune to overfishing. The Leviathan, ancient Israel's version of something big just moved under the boat. Described in the book of Job as a sea dragon with armored scales, flaming breath, and a personality somewhere between Godzilla and a flamethrower, Leviathan is what happens when sailors see one whale tail too many and decide, that's definitely Satan's fish. Biblically, Leviathan was chaos incarnate, God's pet sea beast, proof that he could make something even the angels wouldn't swim near. But later interpretations softened it into a metaphor for evil, greed, or government bureaucracy, depending on which century you ask. Now for the science behind the splash. The real-world inspiration might be Leviathan melvillei, a real prehistoric whale discovered in Peru. About 12-17 meters, 40-56 feet, long with 36 centimeters, 14-inch teeth, it hunted other whales, basically an apex predator that made today's orcas look like dolphins on antidepressants. It lived roughly 12 million years ago, overlapping with Megalodon, meaning the ocean at that time was basically the Call of Duty Apex Predators DLC. Weird detail. Some depictions of Leviathan describe it as having eyes that shine like the dawn and smoke pouring from its nostrils. Sounds dramatic, but it's probably poetic shorthand for a whale spouting in sunlight. Ancient people didn't have binoculars. Remember, they had trauma and imagination. Myth check. Could an animal breathe fire? Not unless methane belching and ignition count, which, fun fact, some whales do emit small amounts of methane during decomposition. So, technically, a rotting whale could have inspired the legend if it washed ashore and started bubbling gas. Congratulations, you've just found the Bible's first special effect. But Leviathan's real staying power isn't biology, it's symbolism. In every retelling, from Hebrew scripture to Hobbes's political theory, it represents something too vast to control. Fear of the deep, the unknown, bureaucratic paperwork. The ocean's reminder that humans are, at best, soft snacks with good Wi-Fi. Overhyped? Definitely. Necessary? Absolutely. Because if you lived in an era with no GPS, no sonar, and a boat made of optimism and wood, you'd need a name for the thing that might eat you. So, Leviathan might not be out there waiting, but its legend proves one thing. Humanity never met a wave it couldn't overthink. And speaking of overthinking, let's end with the only real animal on this list that's both adorable and armed like a medieval knight, the narwhal, nature's aquatic attempt at cosplay. Finally, a creature that actually exists and looks like it escaped from a Lisa Frank notebook. The narwhal, Monodon monoceros, a medium-sized Arctic whale, is nature's most confusing design choice. A torpedo with a giant spiral tooth sticking straight out of its face. It's as if evolution got bored halfway through and said, "Screw it, let's give it a jousting lance." That horn is actually a tusk, a canine tooth that grows through the upper lip up to 3 meters, 10 feet long. Only males have it, usually. Though occasionally females get one too, because gender roles are a myth even in the ocean. Inside the tusk are millions of nerve endings, meaning it's not for stabbing seals or slaying dragons. It's basically a 10-foot sensory antenna that lets them detect salinity, temperature, and pressure changes. Translation: the most over-engineered weather app in the Arctic. Narwhals reach about 5 meters, 16 feet, in length and weigh around 1.5 tons. They dive up to 1,500 meters, 4,900 feet, deep in icy waters hunting for halibut, cod, and squid. Their hearts slow down to half speed to handle the pressure, which is honestly more chill than most people at Costco. Weird detail? The tusk actually spirals counterclockwise, just like unicorn horns in medieval art. Coincidence? Not really. Viking and medieval traders once sold narwhal tusks as unicorn horns for absurd prices. European royalty paid fortunes for them, believing they could detect poison or purify water. So yes, narwhals finance centuries of magical nonsense. Myth check. No, they don't impale enemies or joust underwater. Scientists think the tusk is partly for dominance displays and maybe gentle fencing during mating season, basically, aquatic flirting with pointy sticks. And despite looking like a fantasy creature, the narwhal faces very real survival threats. Climate change is melting Arctic ice, forcing them into open waters where they become easy prey for orcas and hunters. They rely on stable sea ice to rest and hide from predators, so less ice means more stress. But still, they've survived everything from ice ages to Viking souvenir shops. If evolution had a sense of humor, it's the narwhal, an introverted whale that quietly says, "I'm fabulous, but also functional." So next time you see a unicorn on a coffee mug, just remember there's a real one out there with a mortgage and a temperature sensor. And there you have it. 7 bizarre creatures spanning the full spectrum of reality, from mythic scream queens to tusked introverts still swimming among us. Whether forged in fire, fossil dust, or sheer human confusion, every one of them tells the same story. Our obsession with the weird, the wild, And the what the heck did I just see? Think about it. The werewolf taught us to fear what lurks inside us. The Cyclops reminded us that anatomy textbooks matter. Vasuki made snakes the original gods of tension and flexibility. The Banshee turned grief into surround sound. Mothman proved anxiety can fly. Leviathan showed that the ocean has better horror writers than Hollywood. And the Narwhal, well, it's living proof that evolution sometimes designs for vibes, not logic. From a scientific standpoint, these legends reveal a lot about us. We invent monsters to explain the parts of nature we can't yet measure, label, or emotionally process. We give fear a face, power a purpose, and mystery a PR campaign. And honestly, thank goodness for that, because without imagination, half of paleontology would just be, we found a weird bone again. Next time, we're roasting ocean monsters uglier than your nightmares. So hit subscribe or risk meeting them first. Because from fossil freaks to ocean mistakes, Earth's resume is full of typos, and we love everyone